You think of yourself as one continuous person. You're not. Biologically, you are rebuilt from scratch, atom by atom, every few years, and nobody ever tells you where the old version of you actually goes. Here's the part that sounds impossible until you check the research. Your skeleton, the hard, seemingly permanent frame holding you together right now, is completely rebuilt roughly once a decade. Specialized cells called osteoclasts break down old bone tissue, while osteoblasts build new bone in its place. A slow-motion renovation happening inside you right now, one you'll never feel. Your liver, one of the few organs capable of regenerating itself almost entirely, replaces most of its cells within a few hundred days. The cells lining your entire digestive tract are shed and rebuilt within about a week. Your red blood cells survive for around 4 months before being broken down and replaced. Even your taste buds only last around 2 weeks before dying off and being rebuilt from scratch. For decades, scientists suspected this was happening, but had no reliable way to prove exactly how fast. Then, unexpectedly, the Cold War handed them the tool they needed. Beginning in the 1950s, above-ground nuclear weapons testing released massive amounts of radioactive carbon-14 into the atmosphere. Plants absorbed it, animals ate the plants, and humans ate both, meaning that carbon-14 levels spiked in the tissues of nearly every living thing on Earth during that era, then declined predictably once testing moved underground and stopped. In the early 2000s, a Swedish scientist named Jonas Frisén realized this radioactive spike had accidentally created a natural dating system. By measuring the carbon-14 levels trapped inside human cells, specifically within the DNA of the cell nucleus, which stays fixed at the moment a cell is born, his team could calculate almost exactly how old any given cell actually was, regardless of how old the person carrying it happened to be. The results confirmed what indirect evidence had long suggested, and added a few genuine surprises. Muscle cells in the ribs, for instance, turned out to be about 15 years old on average in most adults. Fat cells are replaced roughly once a decade, and the cells lining the small intestine, some of the hardest working tissue in the body, turn over so fast that the average age of an intestinal cell is measured in days, not years. But here's where it gets stranger. Not everything gets replaced. Frisén's team found that the neurons in your cerebral cortex, the part of your brain responsible for higher thought, memory, and personality, are essentially as old as you are. Once formed, most of them never divide again, and you carry the vast majority of the same cortical neurons from early childhood until death. The lens of your eye works the same way. The proteins there are laid down before birth and never replaced, which is part of why the lens gradually stiffens with age, eventually contributing to the reason many people need reading glasses by their 40s. So it isn't that you're rebuilt entirely, it's that you're rebuilt selectively, with certain structures held in place as a kind of anchor, while almost everything else churns through constant turnover around them. This raises an old philosophical puzzle in a startlingly literal, biological form. The Ship of Theseus is a thought experiment first posed in ancient Greek writing, asking whether a ship remains the same ship after every one of its planks has been replaced over time. Philosophers have debated the answer for centuries without resolving it. But your body doesn't just resemble that thought experiment, it runs it, continuously in real time, using actual atoms instead of wooden planks. Roughly 98% of the atoms in your body are replaced within a single year, according to estimates from that same body of cellular turnover research. Almost none of the physical material that made up your body a decade ago is still here. And yet you feel like the same person you were then. The obvious question is why? Part of the answer lies in how memory works. Your brain doesn't need to keep the exact same physical atoms in order to preserve the pattern those atoms once formed. Neuroscientists describe memory as being stored less like a photograph and more like a recipe. A set of connection strengths between neurons that can be maintained and reinforced even as the individual molecules making up those neurons are swapped out and replaced. As long as the pattern of connections stays roughly intact, and as long as those long-lived cortical neurons stick around to anchor it, the information they encode can persist for a lifetime, even while nearly every atom involved in storing it churns over entirely. The other part of the answer is less biological and more psychological. Developmental researchers have long pointed out that your sense of being a continuous self depends heavily on narrative, the ongoing internal story you tell yourself that links yesterday's version of you to today's version of you to tomorrow's. That story doesn't require the same physical material to feel true. It only requires an unbroken chain of memory. One moment linking to the next, each one referencing the last, regardless of what those moments happen to be made of at the atomic level. In other words, you are less like a fixed object being preserved and more like a wave moving across water. The water molecules that make up a wave change constantly as it travels, yet the wave itself remains recognizable, retains its shape, and can travel a very long distance before it finally breaks. Think about what this means for something as ordinary as an old argument you still hold on to, or a version of yourself you still feel embarrassed about from years ago. None of the cells that were present during that moment are still inside you. Not the skin that blushed, not the muscle that tensed, not almost any part of the body that experienced it firsthand. What persists isn't the material. It's the pattern, replayed and reinforced by a brain that is itself only partially the same brain that first recorded it. This doesn't mean identity is an illusion. If anything, the science suggests the opposite. Identity turns out to be sturdier than the atoms it's built from, since it survives a process that would destroy almost any other kind of continuity. You are not the same physical object you were 10 years ago. Depending on which tissue you're talking about, you might not share a single atom with that version of yourself. And yet something recognizable clearly persists, carried not in the matter, but in the pattern the matter happens to be arranged into at any given moment. The next time you look at an old photograph of yourself and feel a strange mix of recognition and distance, that feeling is more accurate than it seems. You are looking at someone made of almost entirely different material, running on many of the same long-lived neurons, carrying forward the same basic pattern, one continuous wave that has been rebuilding itself in place since the day you were born, and will keep doing so until the day the wave finally reaches shore.